Yes.
That's okay. So, Academy preparing to go live. And obviously, we'll be live on our own for the first couple of minutes.
Did I send you this, by the way?
You did send me notes. I said I was going to make them available. Do you know what I thought was confusing about the whole Lewis thing? Is that you're called Lewis and you were referencing...
The bandwidth to handle 2 screens in the house.
Oh, that's okay. There you go. We are live, mate.
Do they have the notes?
No, I beg your pardon. But I will make those available at the end, so...
Do you think you could make them available before the message?
I don't think it's necessary. I've listened to your message, don't worry.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, we are live, mate.
Okay.
I should tell you that now.
But is anyone listening?
Is 5 watching now? That's how quickly people get on. If you're watching, why not say something, hello, in the little chat bar on the side? That'll take a couple of minutes to get through to them as well. So,
who would these people be? Generally your church, right?
It's hard to know until they make themselves known on YouTube. And bear in mind, Lewis, you are now live, so any questions you're asking me, you're asking them.
Yes.
Yeah. With YouTube, you don't. I don't think it shows you in the same way as say on Facebook who is about and what have you. But I've put the link up on Facebook. Post. Let me do one. Frances Trotter. She's one. She's watching. She's braved it. She said hello.
Hi, Frances.
Hi.
2 seconds then.
I think we could heighten this.
Share.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
There we go. Okay.
Talk you through it.
Cheryl Glover is also on there.
Hi,
good to see. Let's see, when we get up to say 10 people, well, there we are, we're on 11 people now, so that's lovely. Lewis, Jen, welcome.
Thank you.
To Ammanford Evangelical Church online-ish. You know, coming all the way from Newport there. Thanks for giving us your time this evening to think about the topic of friendship. Now, we've already chatted about this, but let me just say it again so it's fresh in your minds and for everybody who's tuning in to watch as well. The last 3 weeks we've been holding Lifting the Lid sessions where we've been honing on a particular topic. We've had 2 weeks looking at mental health, and we also had a week with Kevin Adams in the United States, kind of discussing lockdown life and racial tensions in America, his perspective versus our perspective. And one of the interesting things is that from both the mental health sessions and the evening where just Kev and I were speaking about kind of how we've learned from lockdown, reflections on lockdown and things like that, relationships have been a massive, massive factor, you know, in maintaining health mentally, in helping people with mental illness, how key relationships are in that. And both Kevin and myself were just reflecting on how one of the main things that lockdown has robbed us of is human contact and relationships. So we thought, seeing as that had come up 3 times on the bounce, it would be good to do an evening specifically on relationships, or as we're titling it this evening, friendships, how important friendships are in all of our lives. So, Lewis, I knew that you had done some work on friendships. That's correct, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it is. I spent a chunk of last year thinking about it.
Yeah. So you prepped some stuff already in this arena, and we're really grateful that you were willing to record some of those thoughts for us. We're going to share in a second. But why don't you introduce yourself, and Jen, you can introduce yourself as well, and just tell us like how I know you, what's going on.
Well, thank you very much for having us, Sam. We're glad to be with you. We're probably not that known to Ammanford Evangelical, but Ammanford Evangelical are known to us like for years. I grew up in Llanelli, Jen grew up in Swansea, and we've had friends from Ammanford. You, as a church, have been incredibly kind to me personally. I've been given, I don't know how many books, cast off of Kevin Adams' books over the years. One of your members sponsored me through Bible college a long time ago, but I'm indebted to him and to his family and to your church. We just have huge regard and gratitude to God for you. Sammy and I have been friends since I think the final year of university, when Jonathan Thomas I think paid for us both to go on a Proc Trust Young Preachers weekend, and we shared a room. And
yes, I'd forgotten about that. Of course,
yeah, it started. And we've been friends ever since. I've been really grateful to be walking every step of this, finishing university, church internships, figuring out some work, call to ministry, pastoring a church. I've been really grateful to be doing it alongside you as friends ever since. And you were at our wedding. I married Jenny. This is my wife. Say hi, Jen.
Hi.
Say hi, Jen.
Hey, Jen.
Hi.
What would you like to say?
Well, I think my links with Ammanford Evangelical go back further.
Yeah,
I might dare to. I think I met Heledd Wynn. I don't know if that's her name. Is she Heledd Wynn, or is she married and something else now?
She's definitely married. I'm not 100% certain on the status of surnames, because there is names on legal documents and in school, and then there's names passed on to children.
Anyway, the point of it was that I met her through Evangelical Movement of Wales Camp, and I remember going to see her, and her family very kindly had me over, and bizarrely ended up helping paint the cellar. Am I getting that right?
Well, thank you very much for doing that.
Yeah, that's quite right. I think my input was minimal. But yeah, so known you a little while, and know you specifically, Sammy, through Lim. So yeah.
And as a church, we just hold, so at Christchurch Newport, we just hold Ammanford Evangelical dearly. We pray for you. I'm grateful to God for you.
Yeah.
Genuinely grateful for you.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys over in Christchurch especially, like the broader relationship, partnered with us in lots of ways over the years, just through friendship for myself and Jonathan, kind of camaraderie, like fraternal support as we've met up as groups. We've taken youth groups up to you guys over years on various occasions. Matt, when we were kind of looking after Matt, and Matt was coming on with us before finding his place in Cardiff, you guys were partnering with us in that. So it's been quite a long relationship with many threads. And it's fun. So you've actually recorded already what you're going to say this evening. We're going to watch that video together now, and afterwards there will be an opportunity for a little discussion between the three of us.
Yeah.
And anybody on the YouTube chat who wants to kind of message in any questions. So just to let you know what you need to do, if you're watching on YouTube, there's chat function built into YouTube. You just need to go on there and you need to ask your questions. That can be at any point during the next 30 minutes of Lewis speaking. And indeed, then when we come back together at the end of chat, if you have any things you want to quiz Lewis on, or Jenny on, or myself on, all three of us are going to be happy and very keen to give our input on the topic of friendship. So with that being said, Lewis, do you want to pray? And then I'll chuck the video up.
Yeah,
thanks, Brad.
Father, thank you so much for your friendship to us. Father, when we were your enemies, your son came and laid his life down for his friends. And just as his church, as your church, we just bask in that. We're listening to your voice tonight, Father. We want to hear of Christ. We want to know how dearly he treasures his friends. And Father, from the overflow of all that you do in our hearts, Father, make us better friends, please. It's not easy. Father, we all carry, we all live in the temptation to be selfish. We carry the scars of hurts. Father, friendships aren't easy, but through something that can taste so good, we can glorify the living God. So please help us. Give us ears to hear and hearts willing to receive in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thanks, Bed. Okay. This is where the heart rate increases. Do I know what I'm doing in sharing these things? Can you see that? You can, Lou.
I can, mate. I've got a black screen and a cursor.
There we are. Right. Well, let's go.
In 2011, Google released their social network platform. They called it Google+. Yeah, anyone still on there? No, of course there isn't. It never worked out. I think they're doing okay though. Don't worry. They looked at Facebook and they said, Google said, yeah, it's a bit more complicated than that. Life is more complicated than, who's my friend? Facebook just said you're either a friend or you're not. Google, based on a series of concentric circles, said, well, you got your friends in the middle, and then you got, your acquaintances, and then you got your work colleagues, and they categorized, or they wanted you to categorize all of your relationships according to those concentric circles. And in the middle, you put your friends, and this is how they define friends: the ones you feel most comfortable sharing your private details with. Comfortable sharing my private details with. That's the definition, according to Google, of a friend. Makes me wonder if I have any, because there are very few people who know the private details of my life. Jeffrey Grief, in his book Buddy System, categorizes friendship in 4 ways: must friends, trust friends, rust friends, and just friends. You've got your must friends, who are your best friends. They're the ones in the inner circle, somebody you can count on when something big happens. But then slightly outside of them, you've got your trust friends, the people that you would consider as having integrity, and you're comfortable with them. You're always happy to see them. And if you had more time, you would be closer to them, but you don't have more time. Then you've got your rust friends. Maybe these are friends that you've had since childhood. Maybe they're the ones you've known for a long time. They're part of your life, but unless something drastically changes, they're not going to get any closer. And then on the very edge of that continuum, you've got your just friends, people that you see regularly and you enjoy, but you have no desire to get closer to. You're happy, at the distance. You're happy with them at the distance they're at. So before we get any further, let's do a little recce. What do the friendships look like in your life? Must friends, trust friends, rust friends, or maybe just friends? This is a shame-free conversation. This is a big deal. Maybe it's none of those. Maybe it's dust friends. If it is, if when you consider friendship, all you can see is dust and nothing, then there's no shame. Like, it is a common experience. Loneliness is described in this country as a silent epidemic. It's such a big deal that the UK government have appointed a minister for loneliness. This is a real issue. It's estimated that 8 million men in this country feel lonely once a week. 11% of men say that they feel lonely daily. 35, I'm told, is the loneliest age. 25% of people say that retirement has left them feeling incredibly lonely. Now, I know that as we talk about this issue, it's going to be landing with some of us. There are going to be 35-year-old or 35-ish-year-olds in this congregation. There are going to be men in the congregation. There are going to be retired folk listening in, and maybe this is your experience. This is a shame-free conversation, I promise you, friend. This is what we're going to do today. We're going to look at what is friendship, or why friendship matters. Why is it so difficult to maintain? Thirdly, we're looking at what it looks like and where can I find it? And lastly, we're going to ask, how can friendships be forged? So we're going to start with some theology, and then we're going to end up with something practical, and I hope it serves you. Let's jump in. Why does friendship matter? And the answer is because we were created in the image of God. in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, we get a glimpse of what God is like. As he's creating man, he says, let us make man in our own image, so plural, in the image of God, he created them. In the image of God, he created him. I can't remember. But the point is, in Genesis 1, 26 and 27, you see the noun changing from plural to singular. And what that tells us is that God is complex. The Godhead, the God that we worship, is a complex Trinity, Father, Son, and Spirit. And they delight in one another and exist in perfect relationship, in a perfect friendship. The God that we worship is friendship. He is community. And we are created in his image. So it makes sense that as part of our wiring, community would matter to us. Secondly, we're told that in chapter 2, verse 18, God surveys everything that he's made. He calls it good. And then he looks at mankind, or man, and he says, it is not good for man to be alone. Now, you may have heard those words read in a wedding. And we always think that because Eve, therefore, comes next, we think that what's being said is that, it's not good for man to be alone, give him a wife. But if that's true, then every single person that's listening is somehow subhuman, and that's not what God is saying. You see, what's being said there is Adam, even before the fall, is less than all that God wants him to be until he is surrounded by community. He is made for friendship, even before the fall. Even before the fall, mankind is less than all that God desires him to be unless he's in relationship with God and with other people. That's why friendship matters, and it goes completely against our culture because we live in a culture that celebrates self-sufficiency. I had a text message once. I was having a bit of a tough day, and I had a text from a well-meaning friend who said, "You are enough." And it was nice to read it, but it's absolute nonsense. You are enough. Self-sufficiency, doing it by myself. There's something biblically subhuman about that. That's why friendship matters. But secondly, why are friendships so difficult, therefore, to make and maintain? There's a load of answers. Let's just go through them in turn. The first one is friendship, like I've already said, isn't valued in our culture. What is valued? Well, it's individualism, it's self-sufficiency. According to Stephen March, in a piece he wrote in The Atlantic, he commented that the icon of American of 20th century Americanism is the astronaut floating in space. And he says, what could be more heroic than the astronaut crossing that frontier, being there by himself? And yet, what could be more tragic than a person literally floating in space miles away from any other person? We celebrate, we don't even realize how tragic it is. We celebrate the lone wolf. We ridicule the needy puppy. Our culture doesn't value friendship. Maybe it's because we consider it a lesser form of love. Because that's what friendship is, isn't it? It's a form of love. And there are others. There's romance and there's affection. And compared to romance and affection, it's a bit pathetic. Now, maybe it's because friendship is the first love that we experience. And I'm glad it is, because I've got a 6-year-old son, and if he'd come home from school when he's back in school, but if you were to come home from school and say, today I made a new friend, I'd be delighted. But if you were to come home from school and say, today I made a new lover, I'd be a little disturbed. We put friendship first chronologically, but we also know that, friendship just doesn't sell, does it? We want to know who's sleeping with somebody else in the tabloids. We don't really care who's friends with who. We value romance and affection higher. And C.S. Lewis writes about it in The Four Loves. He says this: without romance, none of us would have been begotten, and without affection, none of us would have been reared. And he's absolutely right. And as a result, friendship, he says, feels thin and etiolated, a sort of vegetarian substitute for the more organic loves. So the first reason it's difficult is because it's not valued in our culture. Secondly, it's because it takes time and energy that we simply don't have. Ask somebody how they are, and they're likely to say, yeah, I'm well, thank you. Yeah, busy. Well, less so during a pandemic, but we're edging back to it, aren't we? How are you? I'm busy. And if that's true, that is a major problem for friendships, because friendship needs time like plants need water. In the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, which I'm an avid reader of, It says, on average, I don't know where they get this from, but they did some research and this is what they got. On average, it takes 90 hours of time with someone before you consider them a real friend and 200 hours to become close. 90 hours to become a real friend. Now, who's got those to spare? In his book, interestingly, Jeffrey Grief comments that men tend to make friends through their families. So, the wife of my friend, or the friend of my wife, start that again. Yeah, the friend of my wife and my wife, you know what I mean. Or he takes his kids to soft play or to a club or a sports club or whatever, or school, and he makes friends with the parents of his children's friends. And that's sufficient for your 20s and your 30s. But interestingly, Jeffrey Grief just points out that when a man gets into his 40s, what tends to happen is the children sort themselves out. And they also tend to say things like, Dad, get out of my face. And when that happens, what the man loses is the mechanism for forging and making and maintaining friendships. And maybe some of you are in that space right now. You're in your 40s and it feels incredibly lonely because the mechanism for friendships has gone. It feels like the friendship boat has sailed. The third reason is because friendships, I think, have many imitators. There are placebos for friendships. If you're under 35, I'm going to suggest social media and social networks. And if you're over 35, I'm going to suggest it's nostalgia. Let's talk about social media, social network. If you're under 35, you are more connected than, oh man alive. I mean, you've heard people talking about it, haven't you? We are just more connected than ever. I got my first phone when I was 17. It was a Nokia 3210. I had space for 100 contacts in there. 100 contacts. That meant that every so often I'd have to go through my contacts and I'd have to delete people if I didn't think that I was in sufficient relationship with them. And yet today I have an infinite amount of space in my phone for all the contacts I'll ever need, including the ones I never see, including the guy I was bantering with over text who lives in Australia just a few days ago. Like, there's just infinite possibility. And that's extended all the more through social media. And it can give me the impression that I'm connected and that I'm in relationship. But listen to Josh Glancy. You know the theory. By linking us all together, social media has somehow managed to drive us further apart. In a study of adults aged between 19 and 32, those who reported spending more than 2 hours a day on social media were twice as likely to describe feeling left out or isolated. Twice as likely. But it doesn't get any easier if you're older, because instead of social media, the placebo we often take is nostalgia. I asked a man in his 60s recently if he had a best friend and who that was. He gave me a name, and then I asked him, when did you last see that person? He said he thought about it for a moment, and he said, about 30 years ago. Now, I don't mean to denigrate that relationship. I'm sure that person would be there if that friend of mine was in need. I'm sure he would drop everything and turn up. But the point is that, can you not see that the fond memories that he has led him to view reality through rose-tinted lenses? There isn't really a relationship there. There's just fond memories. A sense of nostalgia is a placebo. Fourthly, friendships. Why are they difficult? Because they need examples and we didn't have any. This is so important, especially for the men. Boys follow their dads. Families follow the dads. As the head turns, the body follows. There is a transmission of values from father into families. And if the dad didn't prioritize families, or didn't prioritize friendships, then it is unlikely that the children will ultimately prioritize their relationships and their friendships. Lastly, why is it difficult? Because friendship has fallen. And this is so vital, because even if all the other factors are optimum, friendships are still going to be difficult because of the fall. Because ever since that decision was made in the book of Genesis, I am screwed up in a broken world. And even if everything is right with all the people around me, I am still able to mess up the best relationships in my life. And some of us are living through that right now, right? We weren't even thinking. We don't know why we were thinking. We don't know what came over us. We don't know what came out of us, but we just screwed it up. Relationships are hard. Anyway, thirdly, so what does it look like then? What do relationships look like, and where do we find them? we're going to turn now to the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs is written by a man, or collected by a man, who's just looked at life and has just written down what he sees. It's not law. It's not do this and get this. It's not black and white, absolute. It's grey. It's a man who's just looking at life and he's just writing down what he perceives and what he sees to be true. And he's written loads about friendship, more than we're able to cover in this session. So if you have one of the handouts, it would be really helpful if you were to turn there now. We're on page 2. I'm going to read, 14 or so Proverbs, and then we're going to spend a bit of time unpacking them. So what is friendship, and where do we find it? 17:17. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. 18:24. A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. 25:17. Let your foot be seldom at your neighbour's house, lest he have his fill of you and hate you. 25:20. Whoever sings a song to a heavy heart is like one who takes off a garment on a cold day, and like vinegar on soda. 26:18 and 19. Like a madman who throws firebrands, arrows, and death is the man who deceives his neighbour and says, I'm only joking. 27:5. Better is an open rebuke than hidden love. 27:6. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. 27:9. Oil and perfume make the heart glad, and the sweetness of a friend comes from his earnest counsel. 27:14. Whoever blesses his neighbour with a loud voice rising early in the morning will be counted as cursing. 27:17. Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. 28:23. Whoever rebukes a man will afterwards find more favour than he who flatters with his tongue. 29:5. A man who flatters his neighbour spreads a net for his feet. All I'm going to be doing through this section is ripping off Tim Keller. Tim Keller, who I think was ripping off Ed Clowney, but that's for him to, confess. He looked at the book of Proverbs, and he reckons that there are 4 categories or 4 characteristics of a godly friendship. Here they are. They are constancy, carefulness, candour, and counsel. So constancy, what do we mean by that? What does Proverbs mean by that? Well, 17:17, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. A true friend is consistent. He is there at all times. Now, that doesn't mean he's there all the time. That means he's there in all kinds of times, through the good times and the bad times. Some of us will be friends that only turn up when it's good, who only want to party, who only want to have a good time, who only want to chat. And yet, when it's tough, they're absent. Now, there's a word for them in Proverbs. They're called companions, and we can be surrounded by them. But when we're in need, when we pick up the phone and call them, or more when we type something on Facebook, they're unlikely to be picking up the phone to call us. They're the ones. The companion is the one with no answer and no excuses. But a true friend, according to Proverbs, won't let us go to ruin. You see, a true friend would rather be inconvenienced than to see you suffer hurt. A true friend, according to Proverbs, sticks closer than a brother. In 18:24, I love that. A friend who sticks closer than a brother is a true friend, because he's there by choice. You see, brothers don't have choices. If a brother doesn't turn up to help you when you're moving house, then somebody's going to go tell Mammy. But a friend is there by choice. A friend chooses to turn up and would rather turn up no matter what in order to spare you harm any time. But secondly, a true friend is careful. So it's carefulness. He's emotionally sensitive to, according to Keller, the inner topography, like an ordnance survey map. He's emotionally sensitive to the inner topography of a person's soul. So he understands when to turn up. He understands when to press in. He understands when to back off. He knows when to turn up unannounced. He knows when to just make a phone call. 25:17, let's read it together. 25:17. Let your foot be seldom at your neighbour's house, lest he have his fill of you and hate you. You can be there too much. And Keller points out that a true friend is one that just knows when to back off And when he turns up, when it's appropriate for him to turn up, he is appropriately emotional, or he's emotionally appropriate is probably a better way of putting it. In other words, he can handle you breaking your heart. He won't crack a joke when you're breaking your heart. You may have a number of banter monkeys in your life, but the banter monkey probably isn't your friend. A true friend will allow you to weep. Won't rush you through it, won't try to change the subject, won't try to turn on the telly, won't try to crack a joke. A true friend will let you weep and will weep with you because he gets you. Let me read it, 25 verse 20. Whoever sings a song to a heavy heart is like one who takes off a garment on a cold day. What do you call somebody who does that? Well, yeah. Thirdly, what is true friendship like? It's candor. It's got candor. What that means is a true friend tells the truth even when things are difficult to say. Look at 27 verse 5 and 6. Better is an open rebuke than hidden love. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. A true friend is willing to cross the pain line. He'll say the things that are difficult to hear. Now, this is really important because in our culture, we tend to avoid those sort of confrontational conversations or those awkward moments. And we'll do it in the name of love. We think it's the most loving thing to do, to not bring something up. But actually, what Proverbs is saying is that's what the enemy does. Enemies say nothing. True friends say things even when they're hard to hear. Now, everything we've said is true. They have to be appropriate and they have to be careful. It has to be the right word in the right way at the right time. But a true friend will speak honestly. Lastly, a true friend offers counsel. A true friend cares for your soul. And he will seek to apply, or she will seek to apply appropriate grace for that moment. He cares for the soul. He sees what's going on. And then he applies the appropriate grace for that moment. He's not just a prophet calling for repentance. He's also, or she's also, the priest offering forgiveness and understanding. A true friend brings a true and a right balance of encouragement and rebuke. And what does Proverbs say? This is uniquely sweet. Look at 27 verse 9. Oil and perfume make the heart glad, and the sweetness of a friend comes from his earnest counsel. So it's constancy, it's carefulness, it's candor, it's counsel. And what happens when we look at our friendships like that? Well, what happens when we look at ourselves like that? We get incredibly disappointed, don't we? Because if that's what a friendship looks like, then look how far I am away from it, and look how disappointing my friends are. I'm in exactly the same place. I was in exactly the same place as I was flicking through these notes this morning. I'm a disappointment to myself. I am a disappointment to my friends, and my friends are a disappointment to me. If that's what a true friend is, which is why it is absolutely vital that as we look at these verses together, Proverbs isn't just showing us what a friend should be like. Proverbs is intent on showing us Jesus. Because Jesus is the true friend. He is my real true friend. He calls me his friend in chapter 15, in John chapter 15. Jesus is everything the Proverbs was describing. Keep the verses open and let me just change some of the words for you. Jesus loves me at all times. Jesus was born for adversity and allowed himself to be ruined in my place. Jesus became my brother and sticks closer to me no matter what I do, where I go, how I fail. Jesus left his Father's house, even though we hated him. Jesus understands me, laments with me in grief, sings over me in joy. Like a madman, he took the firebrands, arrows, and death, and he did it to love his neighbor as himself. He never hides his love, but he displays it on a cross for the world to see. Faithful are Jesus' wounds. Profuse are Jesus' kisses. He makes my heart glad. Jesus' counsel is sweet. From before I wake up, Jesus has blessings for me. Jesus was counted as a curse, pierced by the sharpest iron. Jesus catches us in his net when we stumble and fall. If you are here today, or if you're listening today and you feel desperately lonely, then listen to J.C. Ryle. 150 years ago, no one need ever say, I have no friend to turn to so long as Christ is in heaven. No one need ever say, I have no friend to turn to, so long as Christ is in heaven. And when I see him, my faithful friend, dying for my selfish unfriendliness, it satisfies my longing to be known and to be loved. And it brings grace to me because it allows me then to be patient with those in my life that have failed to love me as they promised. You see, when I realize that he has been a faithful friend to me, then sufficient is his love to allow me to overlook your unfaithfulness to me and your unfaithfulness to me. He brings grace to me in my failure, and he allows me to forgive you in yours. That's why friendship has to start with Jesus. That's why it starts with Jesus in the book of Genesis. Friendship with God comes before our friendship with anyone around us. But here's the kicker, and here's where we need to finish. True friendship. Here's the friendship with Christ. Hear me carefully. Friendship with Christ is not enough in and of itself. Go all the way back to the start. Adam walked with God in the garden, and yet God still said it is not good for man to be alone. So it is not right for us to just know Jesus and not to love his people. So let me give you, like the last point is in the handout as well. How can my friendships be forged? I've got a bunch of points. We'll work through them as quickly as we can. Number one, how can friendships be forged? How can I be a better friend? Number one, I humble myself. I admit I am not good at making friends. You see, friendship is dependent on vulnerability. Friendship, honesty, intimacy is dependent on being able to say, I need some help here. And that is just not something I'm very good at. Listen to Josh Clancy. Men aren't good at talking to each other or asking for help. I think women are slightly better at it, but I think this is a human race issue. This may be a cliche, but it's true. Personally, I would rather walk around lost for half an hour than risk looking incompetent by asking for directions. We are proud people, but if we live in that pride and we keep drinking the Kool-Aid of radical individualism, and we never humble ourselves and say to the Lord, firstly, I'm not very good at this friendship thing, please help me, then I will never be a faithful friend, and I'm likely never to experience true friendship. The first step to change is admitting something needs to change. And the first person that I need to say that to is the Lord. If I'm not a very good friend, I need to say to him, Lord, I need your help here. Please help me. I need to humble myself. That's the first thing. Secondly, some of us, not all of us, but some of us may need to reprioritize. Reprioritize. Now, what do I mean there? I mean, I'm talking very specifically into the realm of like jobs and friendships and the way jobs and friendships relate, right? So here's the way culture, I think, considers jobs and friendships. Our culture thinks that jobs are rare, but relationships are common. And so we are willing to move for a job. We'll move across the country for a job, and we will presume that when we get there, we will find friends. But it would seem to me that the reality is the other way around. Jobs, even in difficult times, jobs are easier to find than friends. Jobs and money will be found. We may have to change some desires, lower some expectations, but jobs and money will be found. But true friendships are rare. So let me just ask this, right? In the big decisions of our lives, when it's come to like where we're going to live or what job we're going to do, have you ever allowed yourself to ask the question, how will this choice affect my friendships? How will this choice affect friendships? Consider how much time friendships take to nurture. How many of us have that time to nurture new friendships in a new location? Or maybe how much are we willing to sacrifice in order to cultivate a friendship? Let's be quite practical here. If friendships take time, what are we willing to do in order to allow us to have the time to make a friendship? So what rhythms are we going to introduce into our lives to allow friendships to blossom? So let me just give you one practical one, right? So imagine, say that you decided to meet a friend after work for a drink once a month, and you spend 2 hours with them. You do that every month. You take off August for a holiday, and you take off Christmas for Christmas, and you've still met them 10 times that year. 10 times 2 is 20. That's that's a quarter of the way to having a deep and meaningful friendship. What else do we have to do? Some of us need to reprioritize, but thirdly, how can we forge a friendship? Through we incarnate, we initiate, and we respond. In John 15, Jesus calls us friends. Now, how did that happen? It happened because God incarnated himself. He presented himself to us. God became a man and walked among us. That's how God made friends with mankind. We will never make friends unless we are present. It's so simple, isn't it? We must incarnate. We must present ourselves if we are to forge friendships. This is so important, particularly in light of those placebos. You see, we think, don't we, that just dropping a text message or WhatsApping is sufficient. It's not. We talk about it all the time with our community groups. WhatsApp is a great tool, but that's all it is, a way of saying something. It's not the place that relationships are forged. Now, I know some of us feel more comfortable on those platforms. I know that. But we've got to get off them. We've got to get, we'll move on to it, but we've got to get face to face with people if we're going to forge real friendships. We've got to be present, incarnate, but we've also got to initiate, because Jesus does that too. In Mark chapter 3, Jesus is walking past a lake, and he turns to the disciples and he says, "Come follow me." Jesus takes the initiative, and they do. They get up and they follow him. Now, I would suggest we do the same. I would suggest that we change some of the language. It could be a little threatening to say, "You come follow me." But the point is, Jesus took the initiative. And this is especially important for men. Take the initiative. Don't leave it to accident. Don't leave it to who's going to be there. Don't leave it to your wife. Take the initiative. Say, why don't we invite so-and-so over? Or why don't we just go over and spend some time in their garden? Or why don't we go for a walk with? Take the initiative. Offer, invite, ask. Relationships need someone to take the initiative. Let it be you. And then thirdly, look what the disciples did. What did it take? It took incarnation, initiative, and it took a response. It needed the disciples to respond to Jesus. So, very simple. If somebody invites you, respond. What would it cost you in order to turn up? What are you willing to give in order to say yes? It'll lead to a friendship. Fourthly, do something together. C.S. Lewis, this is what he says. Friendship arises out of a mere companionship when two or more of the companions discover that they have in common some insight or interest or even taste which the others do not share. The typical expression of opening friendship would be something like, "What? You too? I thought I was the only one." You want to forge a friendship with somebody, just do something with someone. Now, we're told that women, or I've read somewhere that women forge their relationships and friendships face to face, whereas men do it shoulder to shoulder. So if men do it shoulder to shoulder, men do something shoulder to shoulder with another man. Invite somebody to come and help you with something. You need some help, don't turn to your father-in-law. Invite somebody in the church. Will you help me do something? Will you help me do this thing? Do you enjoy Newport County? None of you do. Why don't we go see Newport County together? Why don't you go see Newport? Anyway, fifthly, I think, do something together. Fifthly, don't always do something together. Kent Hughes wrote this. He wrote about how male friendships are often center around activity, shoulder to shoulder activity. We do something together. But when they do, this is what he says, they rarely approach the depth of disclosure a woman commonly has with other women. They rarely approach the depth of disclosure a woman commonly has with other women. So the point that Kent Hughes goes on to make is we shouldn't just, if we want to develop real friendships, it's good to do the shoulder to shoulder thing, but they will be lacking unless they are also peppered with face-to-face time. Now, the good news is what that means is just go to the pub with someone. And when you do, be real and be affectionate. How does Jesus define friendship? He describes it as speaking the hidden stuff. Look at, let me read it to you in chapter 15, John 15, verse 15. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. because all that I've heard from my Father, I have made known to you. So according to Jesus, the definition of a friendship is disclosing something that would otherwise remain hidden. Friendship is saying what others don't hear. What that means is when you go to the pub, when you're in that situation face to face, and somebody asks you, how are you? Don't give the pat answer. Disclose the thing that would otherwise remain hidden. And when that happens, show affection. Be affectionate. A true friend knows your fears because you've shared them. A true friend knows what's going on in your marriage because he's asked. A true friend knows where you are most tempted and is able to be affectionate and empathetic and prayerful. Now, that may seem like a million miles away from where you are right now, and I understand that. We're all starting in different places. But what small steps are necessary for you to start moving in that direction? Give it time, ask questions, and when you're asked, commit to just dialing it up, just one click at a time. And eventually you'll be there, you'll get there.
We're back.
I noticed you stopped it at that moment because something happens just seconds later, didn't it?
Yeah, you got a phone call.
Yeah,
How did you find that, mate? How did you find listening to yourself? Did you enjoy that?
Did I look like I was enjoying myself? It felt like I was failing an exam in real time.
And Jen, I appreciate that you knew that Lou was kind of speaking at another church tonight, so you almost had the chance to have a night off listening to him, but you chose to join in and have a little listen as well. So I appreciate that. I'm gonna first question, silly question, Lewis. I edited that.
Yeah.
Could you tell, other than like the top and the tail, could you tell what I'd changed?
No.
You didn't. No. Nothing was odd about the whole thing to you?
Lighting.
Was it sped up slightly?
It was sped up ever so slightly.
I said to Jenny, does my voice sound like that?
No, that's it. It may give you a higher pitched voice, which when I was kind of fiddling with it, I even sped it up even more, and I thought, no, that's ridiculous. I can't do that. But then listening to it now, I still thought, what a ridiculous voice.
Honestly, I would imagine that if anyone from Christchurch is watching that, they would really hope that one day the technology comes out that'll allow them to do that live on a Sunday morning.
And in the end, it only saved like a minute off it, which I've spent now chatting about it. So there we go, all worthwhile. Okay, we have had a question on YouTube, but before we get to that, because I think that kind of fits in with a couple of other things that have come to mind, I just want to kind of follow up a couple of things, a couple of comments that you made, really, and maybe ask you to elaborate them or go a bit deeper on them. The first one is really close to the start. You mentioned like a life without friendships is a subhuman life, which sounds a bit nasty. Sounds like you're picking on someone who's already been dealt maybe a difficult hand.
Yeah.
I think I know what you mean by that. Do you want to just clarify that? Why is it good to call it a subhuman life if we don't have those sort of deep, important relationships?
That's a really important question. I mean, you say these things when you're preaching sometimes off the cuff, and you don't really consider how difficult some of those things can be to hear, especially if you're listening as somebody who, you know, as soon as you see the title, friendship, you immediately get put on the defensive because, you know, for some of us, friendships are very difficult. I think there's a few comments that probably should be made. Firstly, there is, so in the book of Genesis, the Lord has given us a picture of the design according to him and his and the way it should be. But that picture in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 is followed by Genesis 3, and in Genesis 3, everything goes sub-natural. The truly natural, beautiful life, the true life, was lost to us at the fall. So I'm not picking on those people who find friendships very difficult. I'm acknowledging that in all of our existence, mine included, there is something subhuman. Now, the first subhumanity is that naturally we don't live in relationship with God. And to know God is to be living the life that he has for us. But secondly, is, it's not just an upward direction, it's a horizontal one as well. The Lord has created us for communion with others, not just with him, but with others. And so if we're not in communion with other people, then we are not living the fullness of all that God would have for us. Is that clear? I mean,
that's how I took you to mean it at the time, that it wasn't like an accusation. It wasn't meant as an accusation, but it was, I guess, if people are missing out on those relationships, they probably acknowledge something of it themselves, that it feels like something is missing.
Yeah.
There are times the lockdown has got me really desiring like a day or two to myself, like completely to myself, to be on my own with my thoughts and all of those sorts of things. But people who are on their own, people who have been long-term without friendships, what we're speaking about now, friendships specifically, they probably acknowledge that there's something in us that feels like this is not right, is it? I am made for more.
Yeah, I agree. I think one other comment worth making is, I would have never had the experience of listening to myself preach like this before, and I realized that I'd left out a pretty important word when I was discussing that. So in talking about it is not good for man to be alone, Genesis 2:18, I think, I was trying to explain, I don't know if I did a very good job of saying this, that we always think that is, because we hear it in weddings, we think that what's being said there is, it is not good for man to be unmarried.
Yeah.
Actually, even though Eve is given Adam, that is first applied. Eve is firstly community, not firstly his wife, even though he is his wife, she is his wife. Because otherwise what's being said is, because the implications otherwise are, unless you are married, it is not.
That's not good.
Yeah, and that's certainly not the case, because, in the Lord Jesus, we have a pretty good example of somebody who, the perfect man who lived his earthly ministry unmarried. So it's, I wish I could clear these things up every Sunday. Thank you.
Yeah. And just another thing, you did explain this at the start, but you kind of went back to it at the end. By the end, it was a little hazy in my brain, so I wanted to give you the opportunity just to clarify again the difference between a companion and a friend.
Yeah.
So if you like, you were expressing something about how sometimes we can have this hierarchy of relationships, and we think, the romantic relationships are hierarchical, they're above. And what you're saying there from Genesis is that actually it's the friendship ones which are foundational. So what was the difference, as you were kind of thinking and describing, between companions, like the multitude of people we know and we're friendly to, and actual friends?
Yeah. It's a biblical distinction, like in the book of Proverbs, where we're given that, we're given those two pictures. You've got a friend and you've got a companion. I think to understand it, it's probably worth going back to, like, when did Facebook come out? When was that a thing? When we were in university when Facebook started, right?
2006, I think.
Yeah, or maybe. Oh gosh, okay. Okay.
2005,
So I can remember really early on, a conversation. You get onto Facebook, and the conversation was often, how many friends have you got? And it, it gave us the impression that we have many, many friends. What I think Facebook tells us is how many companions we have, as in how many people are in our life. The biblical definition of a friend is far narrower than that. It's not just people I know. It's people who know my soul, who know me, people with whom I share, John 15:15, Jesus calls us friends because he shares the secrets with us. So it's somebody who knows my soul. It's somebody who knows the secret things. And so when you start defining friendship in those categories, you realize actually that I've got far fewer friends than I realized. Now, that's not to denigrate companions. That's not to play it down. It's good that we are surrounded by people who think well of us and we think well of. And I'm sure to varying degrees we can turn to. But a true friend is one who walks closer than a brother, who knows me, who, I like Keller's phrase, who knows the inner topography of my soul. And that's I think that's a distinction that Proverbs gives us.
You mentioned Facebook there, and you mentioned it in your message as well, of how we can mistake or substitute friendships for social media connections. And this, I guess, is a question to both of you now. So Jen, you can weigh in on this. This isn't just a follow-up asking Lewis to say something off the back of what he spoke on. But like, can you see the dangers in people trying to live friendships out online? So having that like number of friends and connections on Facebook, for example, but that's kind of like the only place you go to bare your soul, for example. Like, how does that, in a digital world, can that really work? What do you think?
You want to go, Dave?
I think that there's a lot of pitfalls to it. I think that it's not necessarily bad, but I think you need to have your eyes wide open as you navigate relationships in that forum, because I think there's things lacking online that biblically we need within friendship. So you can't, for example, if you are bearing your soul in your monologue online, you don't have someone looking you in the eyes and someone able to respond to you saying, I love you, but I'm not sure that you're, seeing this situation properly, or have you considered this perspective? Or so I think that's one of the dangers, that you don't have that face-to-face interaction that allows for that iron sharpening iron, and I think that it just opens gives loads of opportunity for jealousy and for I certainly personally can find just it gives real mind games for me, like feeling really left out of situations, looking and thinking, oh, my mates have gone somewhere and they've left me out. Well, not currently, because no one's going anywhere, but
hopefully
in normal life, pre-pandemic, they've had this event and I've not been invited, and the world suddenly then becomes all about me, rather than looking and rejoicing that my friends have had a nice time together. There's a self-absorption that comes, I think, with the online worlds that we have to be careful of. It's not the worst thing in the world, is it? We just, I think, have to have our eyes open to what those friendships are.
I think one thing worth mentioning maybe is just the potential for placebo with social media and social network. This isn't the place to. It's a far more complicated and complex conversation than simply social media is good or social media is bad. But it can give me a false sense of my relationships. My relationships can be a mile wide and an inch deep. And if that's the case, then in that moment of need, well, I might, send out a Facebook post, share, you're bearing my soul, but I'm unlikely to get somebody to pick up the phone and call me, or to arrange, or to turn up at my door. I might get, the emoji, but I'm not likely to get somebody look me in the eyes. And I would connect that also with WhatsApp, and our community groups in the church are, we long for them to be places of genuine communion and relationship, and yet so much of it happens on WhatsApp, to the point where very little sometimes happens in reality. And yet it seems that if I've been active on WhatsApp, it can give the impression that I'm more in relationship than maybe I am.
I think one of the biggest fears I have for people utilizing things like Facebook and what have you that are public as an arena for building friendships and living friendships out, is that when we post on social media, we think like we're speaking to everyone. Yeah. So I've got this number of friends. I make the statement as personal or as generic as I'm willing to make in that area, but we think we're speaking to everyone. Yeah. But the reality is, when we're doing it on that sort of medium, we're actually speaking to nobody.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can make the assumption that you've seen it.
Yeah.
I go on Facebook this week trying to find a screenshot of you to put on an advert for this, and I realised Lewis isn't on Facebook. So these last however many years that I thought that he's ignoring me, or he knows all about my life.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? We think we're speaking to everybody, and the reality is we're not actually speaking to anybody.
Yeah.
So it doesn't do the thing that we assume that it is doing for us. And when we're desperately trying to build relationships,
yeah,
then that's going to be so frustrating and so disappointing, because we're going to feel like we're putting in all this work and getting nothing back.
Yeah.
And it's because we're trying to knock a screw in with a hammer. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's important for you to mention, Bud, I think, because friendships do take work.
Yeah.
So if you're going to sow anywhere, sow in the right field.
Yeah.
Like the work is crossing the pain line so often.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody's going to go further than I've gone with them in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes a lot of courage to when you're in those rare moments when you're sitting face to face to somebody and they ask you how you are, and it, you know, we're fooling ourselves if we think that happens often. That happens often. Those are God-given moments to make the most of. But it takes a lot of courage, and it takes the Spirit of God within me to be honest and humble myself. And but I know that in my experience, when I've known grace to do that, they've been times of real forging and deepening and refreshment. I mean, that's when the gospel becomes clear, you know, most precious to me, because that's the opportunity that I get for somebody has to preach the gospel to me and to bring it to bear in my life. And but it does take a lot of work and a lot of courage.
That's like opening the doors and the gates to allow someone to friend you, to like actually do the things that you were looking at in the Proverbs.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the question we've had on YouTube. So this is new to you, mate. New to me. None of us have thought of this.
I mean,
okay,
we did talk about it in preparation.
Any advice on how to give enough input and time to keep our friendships flourishing? There are so many people I'd like to have more time with.
We talk about this all the time. Man, this is such a real thing. There's probably two layers to this as well, because we're in a pandemic at the moment when I think everybody's just gone, chill down. It's all right. Like, let it simmer. Don't worry about it. I'm not catching up with my friends. It's all right. They understand. But we're all feeling the engines revving a bit now, aren't we? And we're all just sort of waiting to get back into life as it was. Or we long to go back to that. And what does that mean for my friendships? Where do I go? Who do I see? I don't want to go back to 100 miles an hour as it was. And man, I'm feeling that. Babe, do you have any, just set you straight up?
Yeah.
Have you got to be selective?
I think it's very personal. So obviously, like, we don't know the person's situation that's asking that question. I think I don't think it's wrong to prioritize, in one sense, some relationships. I think that our culture has, maybe it's social media, you know, maybe it's wider stuff, but that we have the impression we can be really good friends with a lot of people. I don't think Christ sets that example. He had a small group of close friends.
That's great.
I don't think that it's wrong. I think it's very difficult to do it, and I'm not very good at going. You still need to love everybody, don't you? You need to be kind to everybody, but it takes a lot of wisdom and thoughtfulness and prayer, I think, to prioritize what friendships help me flourish, what friendships point me to Christ, and vice versa. I don't know.
I wonder if it's worth just having to think about how we quantify friendship as well, what metrics we use. So,
well, you've told us the metric we have to use is people who know our deepest, darkest secrets.
Yeah, and that's it. But I think, but very possibly in our culture, we think time is a more valued metric. So it's the person I spend the most time with, when actually the Lord would say it's not about the person you spend the most time with. It's the person who knows you the best. That's your friend. So
if it was down to time, then in normal life, it would be who you work with.
Yeah, absolutely.
That they are by default the people you spend most time with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
it's not that.
Yeah, in terms of forging a friendship, I think Jen's point is really, really important. Like, we see the Lord rolling with 72, we see him very close to 12, and we see him best friends with 3. And they're the ones that, he shares the secret things with the 12, but he takes 3 up the top of the mountain, say, come and hear my Father. And it's okay for there to be 3 in your life, or just 1 in your life who you may not see as often, but when you see, you make the most of. I can think of a handful of men in my life. I would actually consider you one, Sam, that I don't see enough. But when I see, I'm not going to waste my time by just talking about the weather. I want it to be meaningful. Now, I wish I could see more of you. I wish I could see more of the other men as well. But it's the nature of the friendship is, in order to make it a friendship, it's got to be real. And I wonder if the question is coming from a place of, I can't give my time to all of these people. And I don't think the Lord is asking you to worry necessarily about the fact that you're sowing widely. I think he's just asking you to pour in deeply into one place, or into select places.
See, now, as you're both giving your answers there, I'm thinking maybe one of the mistakes we fall into as Christians is thinking that we have to love everybody in the same way, therefore we have to be friends with everyone in the same way.
Yeah.
And that we'd feel bad if we had a stronger relationship with 1 or 2 people in our church than we did with everybody else. And Jen, you pointed out Jesus wasn't like that. So there was nobody he was unwilling to spend time with. There was no one he was unwilling to show love to. From the furthest flung in social circles to the snootiest religious snob. Like, he was happy to be with everyone. He was keen to be with everyone. But as you said, there were layers or levels of intimacy that he had with ever decreasing circles of people. And the reality is, we can only go that deep with a certain number of people. Otherwise, it just becomes a show. Because in the same way we can give the pat answer of, yeah, I'm doing fine, when we've got a deep answer that's regurgitated time and time and time again with loads of different people, then it's not a real answer anymore, is it? It's just a rehearsed, it's just a practice. It's a pretend vulnerability that we've created, that we just pre-packaged and we give out, and we say, yeah, here's my vulnerability, you can have. And when we're doing that, we're not expecting people to help us with it. We're not expecting really people to interact. It's just, it's shammy. So, yeah, I would say in answer to the question, we should be picky. We should be picky in terms of like deep friendships.
It's an acknowledgement of our humanity
and
our dustiness.
Yes.
So friendships needs huge grace. I will never live up to my word. Like, that is just a reality. That is a post Genesis 3 reality. I will never live up to my word. I will talk big about being a friend. I will never live up to it. But also, I am a fine. Only the Lord can be friends with everyone. He is the only one who inhabits every.
Yeah, he's got the capacity.
Yeah, and I am limited by this. I'm limited physically as much as anything.
I know that. I just wonder whether the sense that it might help the person who's asked that when I struggle and I'm grappling with that question, I think I've often fallen into thinking, actually, I need to be everyone's saviour rather than everyone's friend. So it might just be worth stopping and considering, are we thinking rightly about friendship, or am I wearing myself really thin? Am I exhausted emotionally because I'm trying to save and rescue and fix everyone's problems, rather than true biblical friendship? And that it can be exhausting otherwise.
Yeah, I think if you go back, I've posted the link to the notes. It was worth people having the references from Proverbs. When you kind of go and you look at the things that it's describing as expecting of friends, we are but dust, and there's only so much we can do.
I've been thinking a lot recently, Sam, about that picture in Proverbs of Jesus, the wisdom of God, and in chapter 8, wisdom is said to be there, the delight of the Father from the very beginning, and then all the way through the book, we're told, let me tell you what wisdom looks like. Oh, it looks like this sort of friendship. It looks like this sort of earnest friendship. It's just the whole book is just a glorious picture of Christ. And particularly seen in light of those that friendship. It's not me. It's certainly not me. It's describing.
Another question, Graham on YouTube. Thank you for asking the question, Graham. I love this. Do you think friendships are peer related, or can they be extended to all ages? For example, David and Jonathan.
Is there an age difference there in David and Jonathan?
I've heard that. I'm not 100% sure like how people do the maths in 1 and 2 Samuel. I should do. We've preached through it, so I've read plenty of commentaries. But yeah, that's one of the things I've heard, and I presume.
I'll leave David and Jonathan out because I just don't know. I think peer is, there's a shared vulnerability in friendship. There's a reciprocated honesty and vulnerability that I think is probably best and easiest to play out in the closer you are to peers. But the scripture has got so much to say about cross-generational relationships. I'm very happy. I'm very grateful to God for the other elders in our church. I think I'm younger than them all by 30 years. That's not quite true. It's not true. 20 years at least. 20 to 30 years.
60.
They just spat their Horlicks out. What's going on?
I guarantee they're on YouTube this evening.
Too old, yeah, surely.
I'm very grateful for those relationships, but I'm also very aware that personally, I probably, I get the better end of that deal.
Yeah,
I learn more from them.
It is more like a father-son relationship than a brother.
Yeah, the scripture gives lots of different descriptions of what good relationship should be. There's brother-sister, there's brother-brother, there's uncles, fathers, and sons, and in terms of friendship, it's probably an easiest thing to play out as close as you are to peers, and yet the world will go, wow, they've got something special in that church. If the gospel provokes us to befriend people who are most unlike us, and that's obviously age as well. And Jen, you've got the Bible open. Why don't you tell us what God says?
No, I was just precious on. No, I was just reminded of that passage in 1 Timothy 5 that, I was just going to talk about that. The Bible does give. Well, I'll just read it.
Yes,
read it. Do not rebuke an older man, but encourage him as you would a father. Treat younger men like brothers, older women like mothers, and younger women like sisters in all purity. Yeah. So I'm inclined to think I have dear friends in the church who are older than me. I suppose I would always, as the younger party in that friendship, be cautious. Maybe in some senses in the friendship, I feel like maybe I would see them more as a mother figure. I don't know.
Yeah, but at the same time, don't be surprised if the older party looks to the younger person as a friend, because the Lord gives wisdom as He sees fit, doesn't He? And He gives grace where He sees fit. I mean, we look at the world will say it's just weird for a young person to be friends with an older person. We look at Back to the Future. Those Back to the Future films now is like it's just weird that the teenager is hanging out with, you know, the 40.
That's weird.
Man.
How
I've never considered that as odd. So that reflects more on you than the rest of us.
That is odd.
However, maybe they're just part of a church, and they
maybe.
This answer is tanking. So move on.
Yeah. It's hard because culturally we're sort of conditioned to think of intergenerational, cross-generational stuff. You know, my relationships with the other elders, Peter Hallam, who's retired as an elder. I mean, I absolutely love him to bits. I cherish him. But the reality is, I probably more revere that relationship, you know. So I look to him for wisdom more than thinking of what I'd classically describe as a friendship. I can think of other people in the church, you know, some of the more senior folk who it's my absolute delight to be able to share things with, to have them share things with me, to pray together, to encourage each other. But I probably would find it more difficult when there's a large generation gap, just out of, is reverence the right sort of word to use? Out of reverence for them, and in a sense, gratefulness for their age and their wisdom and their experience, to say we're friends, because I'd want to say, well, no, you're better than me. You know, I look to you, rather than this being like an even playing field, which is more what I imagine of as friendship being the description. But I don't know whether that should be the case.
I wonder if the onus is on the younger person to pursue the older.
Definitely.
Like, I think you're right. You know, we are culturally conditioned to just look for our peers when we walk into a room. We will look for the people who are most like us. When it comes to wisdom and learning how to live life, the scripture says the ones who wear the crowns are the ones with a grey head. So go and talk to them. And honestly, if you are blessed beyond. I hear people say, I'm the only young person in my church. That you are blessed beyond. The whole church is there, a gift to you to learn from, for you to learn from. Pursue the older person and say, please teach me how to live. I think that's somewhere else that says that in Proverbs. But Graham, thanks for the question, man.
What would you say to someone who feels that they have, maybe out of a sense of loneliness on their part, poured themselves into potential friendships and relationships, and it just feels like nothing is flourishing, nothing is sticking, that you're
not getting back.
University is long gone, kind of schoolyard friends, they're long gone. Maybe they've moved, they've gotten married, gotten a job, like you were suggesting, Lewis, moved for work, that sort of thing. The desire is there. I want to have close friends. I want to have people that I'm open with, that I'm like intimate with, personal things, that they know the topography of my soul, I know the topography of their soul. But kind of like every candidate that presents themselves, for one reason or another, it doesn't sort of flourish. What would you kind of say to them who just end up feeling like they're the problem, they're a waste of space, and nobody could ever friend them?
The first thing I would say is that there is such evident grace apparent for this person. Like, God is at work. For this person to say, I desire friendship, is a godly thing. It's a spirit-given thing, and I would just be rejoicing in that to begin with. Like, the Lord has given me a desire for friendship. But I'd also acknowledge that, you're sort of living on the the hard end of friendships. They are hard work, and they're hard work for some because it feels like we don't have any. The Lord gives us a beautiful example of friendship. Jesus is wonderful, and he shows us what true friendship looks like. And his friendship with us is one that is not equally weighted. His friendship is one that serves and lays down his life for his friends, regardless of the fact that they are doofus numbnuts that are going to abandon him in a few hours' time. So my point is, we talk about it all the time because everybody feels this to a degree. We can do nothing about the way that others receive us, but we can do everything about the way that we receive others. And the Lord is asking in this individual to walk the Calvary road and just be the best friend you can possibly be, knowing that you have in the Lord a friend that sticks closer than a brother. Keep pouring yourself out. You will know fellowship with him as you walk, and there will be grace. I'm certain that the Lord will lead us to the good pastures there if we keep pouring ourselves out for the sake of his people. I'm certain. But I don't want to play down how painful that is. That's incredibly painful.
I think as well, I that sounds, it's very hard, and wonder whether it's worth, whether this person may have done this, in which case just disregard it. But I think we can make efforts to pursue deep, meaningful friendship, and it fall flat, and that's really painful because you feel you've poured yourself out. But wonder whether that person's maybe ever been honest with someone about that and said, I'm finding this hard. I feel lonely. I am pouring myself and not finding any return. It might be that all the other parties aren't aware, and maybe they're having a good time and they've got other friendships and they're not, they're just not aware that this person is lonely and is struggling. And it takes a lot of courage to say, look, I've been pouring myself out and I'm not getting anything back. It might be that you just pick one person, but maybe prayerfully consider, is it worth having an honest conversation about the loneliness and the disappointments that they've faced with someone?
I can think of one godly and humble person in our church that came to me once and said very much that, like, I don't think I've got any friends, and I was almost able to, it was just a real privilege to be able to just introduce this individual to a few folk in the church, and really just like cards on the table. We use slightly different language, but I basically went, this person's lonely, you're lonely, why don't you be friends? Now, obviously that's, going to be a bit gentler than that and a bit more tender, but the church is the place where it should be a place where we can be vulnerable like that and acknowledge these, none of us are very good at friendships. None of us. We all need God's help here.
And that longing does just, there's something in that situation that just makes you long for Christ, isn't it? And that's not wrong. That's run to Jesus. And
this longing is satisfied one day, friend. Like one day we behold his face and we understand each other as we ought, and we're known as we ought. And there's no easy answer to this, is there?
No, there's not. Okay, well, I thank you very much, both of you, for your time. Jen, is there anything you'd want to say in closing? If I ask Lewis that, we'll be here for another 30 minutes. If I offer some of my thoughts, it'll be another 35 minutes. So you're the only one who's going to get a chance to just say, one thing I'd like to add. Pressure's on.
Yeah, the only thing that I was, Lou originally prepared this for a men's breakfast.
Oh, yeah.
And so talks, I think, quite a lot into the onus is on guys. You need to, lead your family. You need to, I think, just for the women in the church, I think friendship often appears easier. I think that we do face-to-face and we do things together well and we chat and it's worth, I think, as Christian women, considering how can our friendships look different to the world. Women, I think, have struggles that men don't. That's very maybe stereotypical, but I think we're more likely to fall into gossiping. I think we're more likely to be judgy with one another, in my experience anyway. I think that just ladies, consider how Christian friendship is a really beautiful thing, and our friendships should look different to the world. We shouldn't just get together and grumble about our kids. We shouldn't just moan about X, Y, or Z, how can we be pursuing Christ in our friendship together as women and encouraging one another to behold him and to become more like him. So just a little aside, ladies.
You should do this more often. This is good.
Yeah,
this is
good. Thanks for saying that, Jen. Yeah, thank you.
Guys, it's been a real privilege to be with you tonight. Thank you so much for having us.
Well, thank you very much for making yourselves available. Thanks for giving up your evening. I know you had big things planned. You probably had 3 or 4 more episodes of some box set to work your way through.
Yeah, there was a couple of parties you'd been invited to, a rave, and
yeah.
Of course, well, you do live in Newport, so we believe anything you said, really, when it comes to that. Down here in the sticks. Do you mind praying for us before we finish?
Do you want to, babe?
Yeah, of course.
No pressure. Thanks, Jen.
Our Father, thank you so much for this precious church.
Yes.
Thank you that Christ died and he shed his blood for Ammanford Evangelical Church, that he is our example, our perfect example in friendship. Thank you that Jesus did lay his life down for his friends, and that we are among those friends. It is just too marvelous for us to behold, and too big. We are so grateful. Lord, I pray that this church would, as they move forward, particularly out of this season, as they navigate kind of going back into normal life, that you would bless the friendships in this church, that they would deepen, that they would be friendships that reflect Christ and his love for his church. Father, for those members maybe feeling lonely within the church, I pray that you would burden other people to reach out, Lord, and that ultimately they would find the comfort of a friend in Jesus. What a friend we have in Jesus. We are so grateful for you. Please bless this church in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, guys.